Please be seated. You're getting the hang of it. 2 weeks, pretty good. By week 4, we're going to be there, man. We're going to be there. This is the second week of this series, Let Justice Roll. And last week we talked about how important it is to speak up. Last week was all about just speaking up when there is injustice. It's important for us to serve and to give, yes, and to be the immediate presence. And also it's important to speak up. Amos clearly did. We talked about how John Wesley did. We mentioned how in Missouri here our Bishop Bob Farr did at annual conference, and how he called us to also speak up when there's injustice in the world. Jesus clearly did as well. Over and over again, multiple places, Jesus spoke up in the presence of injustice, and they were pretty direct. Let's just say Jesus had a way with words. My favorite one of the times Jesus spoke up in the face of injustice is in Matthew 23, when Jesus says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites." That's how he starts it off. Like when Jesus starts a thing to you by saying, "Woe to you," you're in trouble. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. Hold on now. You strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. That's phenomenal. That is going to work its way into my vocabulary. When you least expect it, I'm going to drop that on you. He is speaking up about the injustice that's being done by the Pharisees in this system. He is accusing them of going through the spiritual motions, tithing, but not practicing justice and mercy. Clearly, Jesus spoke up in the face of injustice when he needed to do so. Last week, one of the things I did was deliver a letter to the office of Senator Josh Hawley in downtown St. Louis. And the letter was on behalf of a group called Missouri Faith Voices. Missouri Faith Voices is an organization of 100 or so congregations around the state, and the letter was expressing gratitude to Senator Hawley for speaking up against Medicaid cuts. I don't know if you've heard our senator talking about Medicaid and what the current legislation is going to do to Medicaid, but he has been quite clear about speaking up because he thinks it's not just. There's just a few examples. These people are not sitting around. These are not people who are sitting around. These are people who are working. They're on Medicaid because they cannot afford private health insurance. They don't get it on their job. I just think it's wrong to go to these people and say, well, we know you're doing your best. We know that you're working hard, but we're going to take away your health care access. That's speaking up in the face of injustice. Another place he said he didn't think it was right to, quote, shut down a bunch of rural hospitals to pay for tax cuts. A huge justice statement. Senator Hawley's speaking up on this particular matter in the face of injustice. So the letter was saying, thank you for speaking up, and please continue to do so. Remember that we heard you say that. So speaking up is one thing, voting that way is another. But still, thank you for speaking up, right? Continuing to do so and advocate for justice on this particular matter. It is a great example. So we talked about how important it is to speak up for justice. So this week, week 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about defining that for which we are speaking up. Grammar nerds in the room, you're welcome for that sentence. We're going to define that for which we are up for which we are speaking. That up for which we are speaking. There we go, I got it, finally. Justice, right? We're going to think about justice. To help us dig into there, first of all, an idea from the well-known and recently deceased theologian and biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann. Walter Brueggemann says the doing of justice is the prophetic invitation to do what needs to be done to enable the poor and the disadvantaged and the neglected to participate in the resources and wealth of the community. Justice is something you do. Doing of justice is a prophetic invitation to do what needs to be done to enable the poor and the disadvantaged and the neglected to participate in the resources and wealth of the community. We can derive a definition from that quote, that justice exists when all are able to freely access the resources and wealth of the community. That's pretty basic definition of justice. When all are able to freely access the resources and wealth of the community. So if we are doing justice, we are working toward that outcome. The desired outcome of doing justice is using the power that we have to eliminate the obstacles that prevent people from flourishing in their lives. And I say the power that we have because doing justice is a communal effort. It is something that we do together. There's a kind of a popular branch of theology making its rounds through the church these days that will focus on the individual and the individual only. You may have heard sermons or read articles. One of the leading voices in this sort of effort is a guy named Jordan Peterson, who's really focused on the sort of individual, like, yeah, we do justice, but it doesn't mean we do justice, it means I do justice. So if like my actions are contributing to justice, then that's what it's all about. And that's not wrong. It's not wrong. Focusing on your individual actions and how that contributes to the good of the whole, that's not wrong. It's just incomplete. It's just not the full picture, because doing justice is a sacramental work. It's communal work. It's something we do together. It's using our power, our collective power, to eliminate the obstacles that prevent people from flourishing, the obstacles in between people and the resources and wealth of the community. To further get into what justice looks like and what it's about, we turn to our dear friend Amos. I gotta say that by week 2 of a worship series on Amos, I'm feeling a little angry all the time. Like, Amos is just not gonna give us a break, right? He's just not gonna give us a break here. But he talks about Amos, he talks about justice all the time. This passage, as Susan mentioned, is likely one of the best known, if not the best known phrase in the entire book. Let justice roll like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. But right before that passage comes these incredibly difficult and challenging words that we hear God say. God says, I despise your festivals. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Take away from me the noise of your songs. Sorry, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I liked it, but apparently God does not. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. So, yeah, God hates worship. That's the message that right? Your festivals, your assemblies, your burnt offerings, your grain offerings, the music that you sing, take it all away. One of the commentaries I read this week puts it pretty clearly. The point of these passages, it said, is not what's wrong with worship, but what's wrong with the worshipers. It's not what's wrong with worship. It's what's wrong with the worshipers. That the worshipers are maybe straining out gnats, but swallowing camels. It's interesting to note that this passage, God says, I don't like your worship, you need to do justice. But no place in the Bible have I ever read God say, you guys, stop doing all that justice. Really focus on your worship. I don't think it's in there anywhere. You guys, I hate all this justice you're doing, but let your worship be really groovy and we'll be cool, right? That's very telling, because this isn't a comment so much on worship. It doesn't mean God doesn't want us to worship. Of course not. It means God wants us to look at ourselves and make sure that we're not just straining out gnats by having really fun worship services and swallowing camels by allowing injustice to happen in the world around us. You're getting worship right, and that's the gnat. But you're not doing justice, and that's the camel. The worship service is pretty, but you're not doing what needs to be done to enable the poor and the disadvantaged and the neglected to participate in the resources and the wealth of the community. Now, a bit of cultural context for Amos's audience. The people of God at Amos's time would not have done justice in the world because of, they saw something bad happening and it made them feel bad, so they wanted to fix it. The people of God at Amos's time would do justice in the world because God said to. It was an act of obedience to God's law. It's not about being moved by someone's situation and wanting to fix it. It's not about feeling at all. It's about obedience. God says do it, and so we do it. In this aspect of justice, we are talking about the Hebrew word, mishpat. Mishpat is often translated as justice in the Hebrew Bible. It's about obeying the law. It's about knowing the consequences of the law if you don't obey it. Mishpat is a retributive form of government, of justice. It's a retributive form of ethical behavior, if you will. You follow the law, or you'll suffer the consequences. And mishpat, this kind of justice, is the baseline for a free society. I mean, it's why there are speed limits, right? Here's the speed limit, and here's what happens to you if you don't follow the speed limit, right? That's mishpat. That is a retributive form of justice. You ever think about it when you're driving? Don't think about it too hard, but the only thing stopping you from not driving in your lane is a little bit of paint on the road, right? There's paint on the road. How does that prevent people from just driving wherever they want? Well, there's a consequence for driving across the line. But you can't say mishpat unless you also say tzedakah. You can't just say mishpat, not just mishpat alone, but justice and righteousness. Let justice flow down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. It is linked together in probably 36 different places in the Hebrew Bible. Justice and righteousness. Mishpat and tzedakah. Now, tzedakah, in many ways, we can think of as the actual doing of the justice, doing of the mishpat. My friend and colleague, the Reverend Brenda Stobie, says it this way: tzedakah is necessary to make justice real. It makes justice real. Righteousness is what makes it real in the world. It brings it to life. If mishpat is retributive, I won't do that because I'll get in trouble for it, then tzedakah is distributive. I won't do that because it might hurt someone else, right? It's the distinction between not wanting to do something because of its penalty versus not wanting to do something because it might hurt someone. A lot of commentaries will put those two things together and tell you that they're synonyms, so whenever you see justice and righteousness, it just means the same thing. But there's actually that shade of difference, and I think that shade of difference is really, really important because it helps us come up out of ourselves and understand that the justice that we do is a communal experience. So, for example, we read a commentator by the name of Hans Walter Wolff who says, by justice, Amos means the order that establishes and preserves peace under the law. This order is realized in practice through legal decisions made at the gate, the place where justice happens in the city, where matters of local jurisdiction are settled. And then Wolff says, righteousness designates behavior which is in the keeping of that order. So, mishpat is creating a speed limit and defining what the penalties are for exceeding the speed limit. Then tzedakah is driving the speed limit so that you won't hurt your neighbors. It's just a metaphor, the speed limit metaphor. Because mishpat and tzedakah, God's justice, encompasses far more than that. It encompasses all aspects of our life. It is complex and it is nuanced. Or as William Sloane Coffin puts it, it's one thing to say with the prophet Amos, let justice roll down like mighty waters, and quite another to work out the irrigation system. Because it encompasses everything. It encompasses food and clothing and housing. It encompasses our financial well-being. It encompasses our relational freedom, accessibility into our facilities, opportunity for work. It encompasses our health care and our education, and on and on and on. And so when Amos calls for justice to roll down like waters, he has to follow that up immediately with, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And if he didn't, the picture would be incomplete. What that means for us is we have to always be asking ourselves two questions that correlate but are very different from one another. The one is the system in which we live just? And the other is, are the lives we are living righteous? Is the system we're living in just? Are the lives we are living righteous? And then we have to apply both questions to the project of doing justice in the world, using our collective power to eliminate the obstacles that stand between people and the flourishing that God intends for them. Is our system just? And are our lives righteous? If we're not asking both, we are straining out gnats and swallowing camels. We're singing songs to God that God really doesn't care to listen to. So, our nation can bomb another country, and we can feel okay about ourselves because at least I'm doing the right thing, right? My life is fine. I'm following God's rules. I'm doing what God wants me to do, so I'm okay. Everything's fine then if I am, right? We take that individualism and we project it outward. But if we're asking both questions, we have to go deeper into that, and we have to think about, is our system really just? Is the way our system is set up, is that just? Does that provide equal access to all people to the resources of our world? We see that locally as well. Those two correlating questions here in St. Louis. After the tornado of May 16th, there was this impulse to serve, and St. Louis saw the struggles of our neighbors with this desire to help, and there was an outpouring of generosity and time and food and clothing and pillows and all the things. Also, what is coming to the surface is that our system is not set up in a way that everyone has equal access to the wealth of this community. And if you wonder about that, just ask anyone who lives in North City about how easy it was to get homeowners insurance. In the struggles to clear debris, to restore power, to access those payments, these have revealed these systemic injustices in our city, brought them to the surface. And we can feel like, yeah, I'm doing fine because I'm helping. Yes, and our system is not just. And all you have to do is a little bit of reading. Google the term Delmar divide, and you will understand exactly what I'm talking about. There's an opportunity before us to realize the systemic injustice in our city and to do something about it. So the point is, we have to ask both questions. Is our system just, and are our lives righteous? With either or question, we're only getting a little bit of the picture. One final thought. As it turns out, the prophet Amos doesn't talk much about love. Remember, our cultural context here is obedience. You do good stuff for other people because God said to. So you're obedient to the law, and you want to follow what God wants you to do. However, Amos is an early theological expression. As the timeline of the Bible goes along, you can read the theology kind of change, affirming that where God's law originates is God's love. The term here is chesed, the steadfast love of the Lord. And that is where the law comes from in the first place. So to put it onto our metaphor, we have a 35-mile-an-hour sign there because it's the law that you have to drive 35 miles an hour. Well, why do you have that 35-mile-an-hour sign there? Well, it comes from love of neighbor. It really does, because we don't want to harm anyone. So like the mishpat, the justice, the laws of God, they emerge from God's love for you and for me and for all people. From that love emerges this call for justice. It's impossible to separate any of these from one another. Chesed leads us to mishpat, which we live out in tzedakah. And by the way, the end result of that is shalom, which we translate as peace. So many Hebrew words this morning. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it this way: power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. I'm going to hold that slide up there for just a minute, Chris, because there is a lot there. Power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. For me, the bottom line, church, is that I do not want to be going through the motions. I do not want to be straining out the gnats and swallowing the camels. I want us to be using whatever power we have together to correct everything that stands against love. I want us to be using our sacramental power to work for justice in this world, to eliminate the obstacles that prevent people from flourishing, from being a part of our community. And my prayer for the church is that we will hear that prophetic call and we will follow wherever it leads. And may the words of my mouth, may the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength, our rock, and our Redeemer. Amen.